For more than half a century, the same compact silhouette has appeared in airport terminals, police armories, embassy corridors, news footage, films, and video games. The MP5 became so familiar that it almost stopped looking like a product. It became a symbol, a visual shorthand for a unit expected to arrive prepared, act with discipline, and leave very little to chance. Professional users built that reputation before cinema spread it. The MP5 changed what institutions expected from a submachine gun. It brought together precision, consistency, familiar controls, and unusually careful manufacture, then gathered decades of public and professional proof. Rivals could challenge its price, its materials, or even the relevance of its entire category. None found it easy to replace the trust already attached to those three characters. This is a historical and technical account of design, adoption, and culture. It is not a guide to operating, buying, modifying, or improving any weapon. The important question is not how to use an MP5. It is why so many institutions kept deciding that they already understood what it offered. To see why that mattered, go back to the submachine guns that defined the Second World War. Many were brilliant answers to emergency conditions. They could be made quickly, issued widely, and used in places where a full-size rifle was awkward. But refinement was rarely the first requirement. Wartime factories valued speed, economy, and simplicity. Stamped components, basic finishes, and generous manufacturing tolerances were virtues when nations needed weapons by the 100,000. Those virtues came with a character of their own. A typical wartime submachine gun was an industrial compromise made visible. It could be crude, abrupt, and quite unlike the service rifle a soldier already knew. After 1945, enormous stocks remained in service while police and military organizations faced a different problem. They no longer needed only the cheapest compact weapon that could be produced during an emergency. They increasingly wanted a compact weapon that behaved like a serious, durable system. West Germany's new arms industry was particularly well placed to answer that demand. Heckler and Koch had built its early reputation around the G3 battle rifle, adopted by the Bundeswehr in 1959. The G3 used a roller-delayed system descended from late-war German development and refined through the Spanish SETME program. More important than the family tree was the design language it gave HK, a recognizable mechanical principle, a common control philosophy, and a way to build related weapons for different institutional roles. In the mid-1960s, HK applied that language to a compact 9mm design. The development model was known as the 54 Hong Kong dollars, and the project was associated with the number 64. Following adoption by West German police and border security organizations in 1966, the weapon received the name that would travel much further, Maskinenpistole 5, or MP5. The name was plain. The idea was not. Most of its contemporaries still treated the submachine gun as a relatively simple close-range tool. HK treated the MP5 more like a compact precision product. It fired from a closed bolt and used roller-delayed blowback, an arrangement that connected it mechanically and culturally to the company's rifle family. At an institutional level, that continuity mattered. A familiar layout reduces the number of new habits an organization must create, teach, and sustain. HK could present the weapon as part of an established engineering lineage, rather than an isolated experiment seeking its first institutional home. There was also a difference that could be felt without studying a diagram. In many older open-bolt designs, a substantial internal mass moved before each shot. The MP5's closed-bolt arrangement removed that particular disturbance at the moment precision mattered. Combined with careful manufacture, it gave the weapon a reputation for accuracy that was exceptional within its class. The mechanism explains only part of the appeal. Several choices formed a coherent package. Precision depended on reliability. Reliability carried more value when the weapon felt familiar to organizations already using HK rifles. Familiarity supported the premium only because the finished product performed as expected. Each part strengthened the others. This also explains its cost. The weapon was not conceived as the cheapest possible collection of stamped steel. Its manufacture demanded care, and care had a price. Yet public institutions do not judge price in isolation. They also count training, maintenance systems, replacement cycles, confidence, and the political cost of failure. An expensive tool can survive a budget meeting when the people responsible for it believe the cheaper alternative creates uncertainty elsewhere. The MP5's early growth was therefore less cinematic than its later legend suggests. Police services, border units, and specialized military organizations adopted it because it occupied a useful middle ground. It was more refined than the wartime generation, more compact than a service rifle, and supported by an established manufacturer. By the late 1970s, it had become well known inside professional circles. What it did not yet possess was a single public image capable of explaining that reputation to millions of people at once. That image arrived in London in 1980. On the 30th of April, armed men seized the Iranian embassy in Prince's Gate and took hostages. The siege lasted 6 days. When negotiations collapsed and a hostage was killed, the British government authorized a rescue operation by the Special Air Service. Operation Nimrod unfolded in front of television cameras. Viewers saw black-clad figures moving across the white facade, smoke pouring from windows, and a crisis that had occupied the news suddenly compressed into minutes. The human reality was grave. Hostages were in danger, one had already been murdered, and another died during the assault. Yet the broadcast also created one of the most powerful equipment images of the late 20th century. MP5s were clearly visible in the hands of the SAS. To a global audience that knew little about procurement or mechanical design, the association was immediate. This compact German weapon now belonged to the visual vocabulary of modern counterterrorism. Nimrod made an established reputation visible. A publicity campaign can attach a claim to a product, but it cannot easily reproduce the authority of an institution choosing that product under scrutiny. The MP5's image after 1980 rested on the belief that a highly selective unit had trusted it when the political consequences of failure were enormous. Other police and military organizations noticed. Some were already customers, many more now had a public reference point for the type of capability they were building. During the following decades, the MP5 appeared with forces across Europe, the Americas, Asia, and the Middle East. Different users chose different configurations and assigned them different roles, but the underlying signal remained stable. This was no longer merely one submachine gun among many. It was the benchmark. International production and long service lives strengthened that position. Licensed manufacture and local support made the family more than a West German export sitting at the end of a fragile supply line. As inventories expanded, the MP5 became embedded in national training systems, police procurement cycles, and specialist unit doctrine. A weapon that had begun as one company's interpretation of the submachine gun was becoming common institutional property. That matters because adoption has a memory. A purchase made in one decade creates instructors, maintenance knowledge, stores, and expectations in the next. Experienced staff teach newer staff what the organization already trusts. Procurement officers inherit support arrangements that appear ordinary only because someone paid to establish them years earlier. Every cycle makes continuity easier to defend and replacement harder to justify. By the time a challenger offers a cleaner spreadsheet, it is not comparing its factory price with the MP5's factory price. It is comparing a new system with an old system whose hidden costs have already been absorbed. Then popular culture multiplied the signal. Filmmakers understood that an MP5 could communicate organized danger before a character spoke. Television used the same visual grammar. Games later turned the silhouette into an icon that millions could recognize at a glance. The weapon's cultural life became so large that many people encountered the MP5 on a screen years before seeing a real one in a museum or news report. That created a feedback loop. Professional adoption gave the weapon credibility. News footage made that credibility public. Entertainment borrowed the image, repeated it, and made it globally legible. The resulting fame then reinforced the sense that serious organizations were expected to own the weapon associated with serious organizations. None of this means that cinema made procurement decisions. It means that institutional reputation and cultural memory began pointing in the same direction. HK also allowed the design to become a family rather than a frozen model. Full-size versions sat alongside the shorter MP5K. The MP5 SD integrated sound suppression into a specialized variant. Other configurations reflected different stocks, sighting arrangements, trigger groups, and institutional requirements. The details varied, but the commercial lesson was consistent: users did not have to leave the MP5 family simply because their brief changed. That breadth is often described as proof of mechanical brilliance. It is also proof of organizational momentum. Once a platform is established, an ecosystem grows around it. Training programs, spare parts, armorer knowledge, procurement relationships, and institutional memory all gain value over time. A replacement must offer more than novelty. It must be better enough to justify abandoning the accumulated system. By the 1990s, HK itself tried to offer a more economical alternative. The Universal Machine Pistol, or UMP, used modern polymers and a simpler operating principle. It was lighter, less costly to manufacture, and available in several calibers. On paper, it answered a sensible question: why continue building a carefully made 1960s weapon when a newer design could deliver the category's basic function with fewer industrial demands? The answer revealed what the MP5 had become. The UMP was not a failure, and several organizations adopted it. But it did not feel like an unambiguous successor. Its simpler mechanism produced a different character, while its lower cost could not reproduce decades of familiarity and prestige. The comparison was no longer between two isolated objects. It was between a new product and an existing institution. This is where the usual story about technology breaks down. We like clean generations: the new design arrives, the old design retires, and progress moves on. Procurement rarely behaves so politely. A replacement enters a world filled with sunk costs, established doctrine, personal confidence, and political caution. The MP5 did not need to be superior in every category. It needed the case for abandoning it to remain unconvincing. At the same time, the category itself came under pressure. Personal defense weapons such as FN's P90 and HK's MP7 pursued a different answer to compact firepower, built around small, high-velocity cartridges and the expectation of modern body armor. They represented a genuine change in the problem being asked. Rather than refining the traditional 9mm submachine gun, they tried to move beyond it. Their arrival should have made the MP5 look obsolete. Instead, it divided the market. New personal defense weapons found specialized users, but neither erased the older platform. Alliance politics, ammunition standardization, cost, and institutional conservatism all slowed the neat transition imagined in brochures. Technology opened a new branch without cutting down the old one. A larger challenge came from compact carbines chambered for rifle ammunition. Police and military experience increasingly favored weapons that could share ammunition and support systems with the wider force while offering more reach and broader capability. Events such as the 1997 North Hollywood shootout sharpened American concern about heavily protected threats. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq further strengthened the place of short carbines in units that once might have relied on submachine guns. This shift did reduce the MP5's domain. It would be wrong to pretend otherwise. In many organizations, the compact carbine became the more versatile default. But losing the center of the market is not the same as disappearing. The MP5 moved from being a broad answer to being a specialized one. Protective details, police units, maritime teams, and other users could still value a mature, compact 9mm system for narrowly defined requirements. The MP5's survival answers the central question. Every attempt to replace it exposed how difficult trust is to manufacture. A cheaper weapon challenged its price. A newer weapon challenged its age. A carbine challenged its versatility. Each comparison still left a smaller set of tasks for which the MP5's particular combination made institutional sense. The design had become more than steel, rollers, and a three-character name. It was a bundle of expectations. Users expected consistency. Procurement officers expected a mature support network. The public expected a symbol of controlled professional force. Filmmakers expected an instantly readable object. Competitors were not merely competing with performance figures, they were competing with a story repeated for decades. There is a danger in turning that story into mythology. No weapon is infallible, and reputation can outlive objective advantage. The MP5's longevity does not prove that old technology always wins, nor that every organization should resist change. It proves something narrower and more useful: when a design aligns mechanical quality, institutional familiarity, and public credibility, replacement becomes a social and economic problem as much as an engineering one. That is why the MP5 remains present after more than 60 years. It began as HK's refined answer to a category shaped by wartime economy. It gained professional adoption because the package was coherent. Operation Nimrod gave that reputation a global image. Popular culture made the image permanent. Variants expanded the family, while the UMP, personal defense weapons, and compact carbines each challenged a different part of its claim. The MP5 did not defeat all of them. It did something more durable: it surrendered ground without surrendering its identity. The broad market changed around it, but the weapon remained the reference against which the change was explained. So why is the HK MP5 so feared? Institutions spent decades treating it as the compact weapon chosen when consistency mattered more than novelty. A film made the shape familiar, but professional adoption gave it authority. By the time competitors arrived with lighter materials, lower costs, or broader capability, they were no longer replacing a machine. They were asking organizations to replace confidence. That is a much harder thing to buy. Which adoption story should Arsenal context examine next? The G3 that gave H&K its design language, the P90 that tried to redefine the category, or the compact carbine that pushed submachine guns towards specialization? Subscribe for the next source-led history of how institutions choose the weapons they keep.